Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to OQ's Wrestling Wrap-Up, which is, of course, a wrestling-radio.com exclusive. My name is Orlando Quinones, and each month here, we bring you the best and biggest stars of today and yesterday in the world of professional wrestling. Now, last month, I had the opportunity to sit in studio with TNA's Kurt Angle, and I'm really excited about tonight's interview because we are being joined by one of the legendary managers in the world of professional wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Paul Bearer. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, Orlando.
There you go.
I'm so glad you reached out and touched me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us, man. I mean, it's always an honor to speak to a legend in this game.
Oh, please.
No, I have to give you that props. First off, what have you been up to? What are you doing now since leaving the WWE?
Right now I'm sitting in my chair, my feet propped up in my office, kicked back.
Okay.
And I have a life now, believe it or not. You know, there is life after pro wrestling. Could you believe that?
Are you ever drawn back to it? Like, do you ever miss it?
You know, to some extent, but I'm still involved. You know, I'm at a point that I can be involved as much as I want to be involved, if you can understand that. Mm-hmm. Like I say, I have a real life. A lot of hardcore fans know that I'm a real mortician. That I'm a real funeral director.
Right.
And I have a degree in mortuary science, and I've always kept my licenses current all these years. And I'm back in the funeral business full time.
Okay.
And so that keeps me pretty busy.
Right.
I manage a full-service funeral home that has a funeral home, crematory, cemetery, mausoleum. We're a Walmart of death, if you will.
There you go. Okay.
And and I get involved with wrestling as much as I want. You know, I do a little bit on the indie scene.
Okay.
And my youngest son, who's 21 now, he's been wrestling for a couple of years, and I go on the road with him just, within a reasonable area, anywhere from New Orleans over to the Florida Panhandle, and manage him, now and then when I have the time. But I keep my finger on the pulse of the business, Once you've been in it as many years as I have, you don't ever get out.
Okay. How's your health, by the way? Just wanted to ask because I know.
I'm doing well.
Okay.
I appreciate you asking, man. I had gastric bypass surgery back, gosh, it's been, over 4 years ago now. And when I made my last comeback with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 20,
right, I
had gastric bypass surgery right before that. My health was horrible then. Mm-hmm. That saved my life. Okay. It really did. But I'm doing well, man. I feel good, and I got to meet you. I guess about a year and a half ago. Yeah. I was up at the Sirius Studios in New York City.
Yeah, you were up here for one of the other shows, and I happened to be walking by, and I'm like, wow, that's Paul, and that's Kamala. So I said, I had to grab you for a drop. So I'm glad we finally linked up on this. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned your son being in the business right now. Did you have any reservations about him joining the business?
No, I didn't at all. I got two sons. My oldest son is, my God, I was getting ready to say how old he was, and damn, I just realized how old I am. My oldest son is 29.
Okay.
And there's a 7 years difference between him and my youngest son. My youngest son is 21. And I guess that would make him 28 then. Anyway, whatever. Mm-hmm. But they were born in the business. My oldest son was born when, right after I became Percy Pringle. I became Percy Pringle in 1978.
Okay.
And he was born around 79. And then my youngest son was born when I was out in Texas with the Von Erichs at the Sportatorium out there. Mm-hmm. And he was born in the business, so he's known nothing else but the business.
Right.
He learned to walk, in the ring at the Sportatorium, and he was at home backstage in the WWE and WWF for all those years. So the oldest one really never wanted to do anything, but the youngest one, I guess it was just meant to be for him. He's a big boy too. He stands about 6'4", weighs about 275.
Wow. And
he's doing well. I'm proud of him, as you can tell.
Okay. Well, how did you get involved in the wrestling business? Like, at what point in your life did you realize that, hey, this is something that I want to do?
Well, make a very long story real short, my parents used to take me when I was, first of all, to set the stage, I'm a country boy. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, mm-hmm. down the Gulf Coast, Gulf of Mexico. And when I was just learning to walk, my parents used to take me to the matches locally here.
Right.
And so I used to go as I was a kid, but then I quit for a while, and I started going again about the time I was in high school. I guess I was about 14. Started going again. Then when I got my driver's license, I was able to drive by myself to the matches, and I just got hooked, and I haven't stopped since then. and I knew then that that I wanted to get into the business, and we'd go to me and my buddies would go, and when I say my buddies, we're talking about Freebird Michael Hayes. Michael Hayes grew up right down the road from me here. I'm from Mobile, Alabama. He's from Pensacola, Florida. It's just right down the Interstate 10 here. So we grew up in the same territory together, and Robert Gibson from the Rock and Roll Express.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember John Tatum. He used to be
Hollywood John Tatum.
Hollywood John Tatum.
Yeah.
He was part of our little clique. And anyway, we all grew up in the same territory.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd go to the matches and help put up the ring and carry the boys' bags and all that shit, and then come back home after the matches and get in the backyard. Oh, backyard! Believe this. Get in the backyard and just practice what we saw.
Nice.
And it was just meant to be, man. It was just meant to be. And I started out wrestling. I had my first wrestling match, believe it or not. I had my first wrestling match in 1974.
Wow. Okay.
And then I wrestled in the Outlaws and Indies here along the Gulf Coast. And then in about 1978, the great Mephisto, Frankie Kane, he gave me the name Percy Pringle. And gosh, it was just meant to be, man.
Okay.
I'll die in the business.
Some of the people you worked with was Steve Austin, a young Steve Austin.
Oh, yeah. Steve, gentleman Chris Adams had a wrestling school at the Sportatorium in Dallas, and I was in Dallas for 6 years. I had an office in the Sportatorium. I'd done other things besides being a manager.
Right.
Anyway, I helped Chris with his wrestling school, helped teach doing interviews and stuff like that, and Steve was one of our students.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up, once he started working, I ended up being his manager. For quite a while, I guess a little over a year.
Okay.
And good stuff, a lot of fun stuff.
All right. Did you see potential in Steve Austin back then?
Oh, absolutely. He was a natural from the get-go, man. He stood out.
Okay. You also worked with the late Rick Rude.
Oh, absolutely. There's been so many. One day I sat back and counted. I've been in the business over 30 years, I sat back one day and started counting, and I quit at about 40. I've managed about 40 guys in the business.
Wow.
And so many of them are gone,
Yeah.
And you talk about Rick Rude, he what a great guy he was. I started with Rick Rude in 1985, back in the Florida Championship Wrestling days down in Florida, working with Eddie Graham and Gordon Soley and all the greats down there. And we were there when Eddie Graham died, as a matter of fact. We were in the territory then. Yes. And me and Rick went from there to Dallas, to World Class in Dallas, and I stayed, like I said, there for 6 years. Rick stayed for about 2, and when he got the call to go to WCW, and I had the opportunity to go, but it was a tough decision, but I decided not to go. I stayed there for another 4 years.
Okay.
But it's all good.
Now, Eddie, you mentioned Eddie Graham. Did you see he committed suicide? He's for those who don't know, he was the promoter in the Florida territory, Florida Championship Wrestling. Did you see that in him? The problems building up that.
No, I really didn't. Me and Rick hadn't been there very long. We were just there a few months when he so. Okay. I got to know him a little bit. I'd see him at the shows because he was the boss, and see him at the office and stuff. But I didn't know him long enough to know that would happen.
Right.
But, we were there. It was on a Super Bowl Sunday. I'll never forget. His son Mike was at the Super Bowl, and they paged him over the PA system, and that's how he got the news that his dad had passed away. But horrible.
Yeah. How did you get introduced to Vince McMahon in the WWF? Like, number one, how was that connection made? Number one, and number two, what was your first impressions of Vince McMahon?
As a matter of fact, Rick Rude got me the hookup with Vince.
Okay.
World Class had died. It turned into the USWA. Jerry Jarrett came in and bought it out, and all these could be really long stories, but I'm trying to give you the Reader's Digest version because I know we don't have a lot of time.
No, take your time.
But Jerry Jarrett came in and bought out the World Class. We know World Class. I was managing Eric Embry at the time. Okay. We tore down the banner off the Sportatorium walls the night that we turned it into the USWA wrestling. But anyway, I guess that lasted, time, it's been so long ago. I can't remember. I guess it lasted about a year and a half, somewhere around there, and business just went to hell. And Jerry Jarrett didn't want to put any money into it, and I don't blame him anyway, because he couldn't get any cooperation at all from the Von Erich boys at that point. And so they basically closed it closed it down, and I was sitting there without a job with
Okay.
with two babies,
Right.
And so Rick was in WWF, and I gave Rick a call and told him that I was leaving Dallas, that I was coming back to Alabama, that I was going to quit and go back in the funeral business.
Right.
And he went, no, we don't want to do that.
Okay.
He says, you just hang tight, and I'll call you back in a little while. Later on that evening, he called me back. He says, you got a pencil? I said, yep. He says, write this number down. I wrote it down. I said, okay. He said, this is Vince's number. Call him. I went, oh, shit.
Wow. Okay.
So I called Vince, and right away he says he knew who I was, because I'd been on the Dallas World Class TV for 6 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did he know?
Yeah. God, yes. Vince, if I'm talking about keeping your finger on the pulse of the business, Vince, that's something Vince has always done, and especially back in those days.
Right.
Well, but he knew who I was. He'd seen my work and everything, and told me he was certainly interested in me. And it was right at Christmas time. It was just a few days before Christmas. And he told me that we'd get together after the holidays, after the first of the year, and we'd talk about it. So, okay, great, man. So, Anyway, the very next morning, phone rang, and it was Pat Patterson.
Okay.
Pat said that Vince had changed his mind and wanted to know if I could come up today, that day.
Nice.
I went, hell yeah! He said, okay, I'll have you'll have a ticket at the Dallas airport, and so that's what I done. I got on the plane, flew to New York, and they picked me up at JFK in a limousine and took me to Stanford, and checked me into one of the nicest hotels in the city, and told me to just drink what I want, eat what I want, just sign my name, and they'd pick me up in the morning and take me to meet Vince at the office back when it was Titan Towers, before it became they bought the new office in Stanford.
Yeah.
And I met with Vince, and it was just when I had my meeting with Vince, we were at a big round table. It was me and Vince and Pat Patterson and J.J. Dillon.
Okay.
And at that point, I didn't have any idea that they were looking for a manager for the Undertaker. Didn't have a clue.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, were you involved in the creative process?
I didn't know that they were looking. Mark started at the Survivor Series.
Yeah, that November.
November of 1990.
Right.
And this was on, I can tell you the day, I'll never forget it. This was on December 22nd, 1990. So this was just about a month after Mark started. Mark hadn't been the Undertaker very long.
Yeah.
When they brought me up there.
He was with at the time he was with Brother Love.
Yes. And so I didn't know that they were looking for a manager for the Undertaker. And then on the opposite side of the same coin, Vince McMahon did not know that I was a real mortician, that I was a real funeral director, that I was an actual shoot Undertaker.
Yeah.
So as we were having that meeting, that came out. That I was a mortician, and I'll never. You just one of those you had to be there situations to see the look on Vince's face as he looked at Pat, looked at JJ, and went. They started laughing. I didn't know what the hell they were laughing at, but they go, ha, 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 he's a real mortician. And hell, if I knew that they were looking for a manager for the Undertaker.
Right.
It was just meant to be. It was just meant to be.
Now, you worked with the Undertaker when he was first starting out in the business?
Yes, I did. He started. He's a Texas boy.
Yes.
And I was like I said, I had an office at the Sportatorium in Dallas, and this big, tall, redheaded kid came by one day, and Bruiser Brody was the booker at the time, and we were all in the office, and he walked in and wanted to get booked.
Right.
Buzz Sawyer had been training him.
Okay.
If you want to call, that's another story. We're not even getting to that.
Okay.
But anyway, long story short, Brody said, we didn't need anybody, so he kept coming back a couple more times. And finally, one Friday night, Brody told him, says, okay, here's your chance. He says, here, put this mask on, get dressed, and you're going to go out and work with me. He said, Percy's going to go out with you. So I went out with Mark Calloway. He went out as Texas Red that particular night, and I managed him in his first match at the Sportatorium. And so we had a connection, before we were hooked up together as Paul Bearer and the Undertaker.
Okay. Now, when you guys linked up, how does that work? Does WWE give you a script to work with? Basically, at the time of the early Undertaker, you were his mouthpiece.
Right. times have certainly changed in this business.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remember, we're talking about. I went on the road with Mark in January of '91.
Yeah.
And at that time, we're not. Scripts were few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it is today.
Yeah.
Every promo, everything is scripted. Everything is
mapped
timed
out.
to the
Yeah.
T. Back in those days, Vince just gave us a ball and we ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
I had those little talk show segments on the show called the Funeral Parlor.
Yes. Yes.
That was strictly mine. I never was given a script. Me and Mark were never given scripts.
Mm-hmm.
We were given bullet points, some things that they wanted us to hit,
Yeah.
But none of our stuff was ever scripted.
T Saturday night's main event. T's the Royal Rumble. Blah blah blah. That type
exactly.
of
He had enough confidence in our abilities, and we were such into it, and we're having so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it was just all natural. It was just meant to be.
Now you mentioned the Funeral Parlor, and that was as a kid that was one of my favorite segments. And one Funeral Parlor sticks out, and I think you know which one I'm gonna mention.
I don't.
Okay.
I bet I could guess. Tell me if I'm right. What about the one when we locked Ultimate Warrior in the casket?
That's what I was about to say.
Everybody says that. Everybody says, I remember when y'all locked Ultimate Warrior in the casket. And a lot of people say we should have left him in it, right?
Wow. I'm not going to say that. But I remember being a kid, and because, as a kid, you're thinking, this is probably real. And I remember your quote to this day. You're like, "You locked it. What have you done?" And my brother was younger at the time. He always thought that you said, "You locked it. What if he dies?" And I'm like, "No, he didn't say that." But like that incident right there, and I remember, back then there were no internet, so I remember I would go and run and read Pro Wrestling Illustrated and those magazines, and they would actually build up the storyline the most. But how do you guys come about with that that incident? Like, how did you plan that incident?
It was just like I say, first of all, I've already mentioned 3 or 4 times, I'm a real funeral director.
Yes.
So a lot of the stuff that we did, I just took some of the real stuff that we did, getting caskets and stuff that we used in a funeral home and just incorporated it into our gimmick.
Yes.
And it was just a natural thing,
But did the Ultimate Warrior, did you have to work with him and, with ideas and that sort of thing?
See, Jim is pretty out there these days,
Yes.
He wasn't like. See, I have a history with him too.
Okay.
See, he worked at the Sportatorium in Dallas when he was first starting in the business himself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He came. They used him and called him the Dingo Warrior.
The Dingo Warrior.
Yeah, and this was early on in his career. Mm-hmm. So we had a history there too, and so I never had problems with Jim. I never have. Okay. And the stories I hear about, and I've read some of the stuff he writes on the internet, and that's pretty far out these days. Yeah. But I can tell by your laugh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But back then, he wasn't that way. He wasn't that way at all. And even when we were working together, we had a great run with him, me and the Undertaker and him. Yeah. We'd done body bag matches and casket matches, and we took this stuff all around the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, all around the world. Yeah. And made some damn good money and had a damn good time. And I never had any problem with Jim. I really didn't, but I can understand how folks, don't understand him today.
I was always curious when that particular funeral parlor was like the bottom of that casket open or like.
No. It was a real casket. It was a real casket, and we did. I say we. I did take the seal. There's a sealer. There's a rubber gasket that goes around the top of it where it closes and seals airtight. Uh-huh. We took that rubber gasket out of there, so it wasn't. He could get air and everything. Okay. So no, he wasn't in the casket, and it was all good. Jim had a very, very good attitude then about working because we were making some good money. Yeah. I mean, and just the fact that you remember this angle as a kid, I mean, a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's the one that stands out. That stands out.
And people really got into it, and like I said, we took that angle all around the world. It was great, and it was just good stuff.
How was it like working with Jake the Snake? That's another funeral parlor incident that took place.
Oh, Jake. I love him to death, man. I hear he's doing well these days. That's good. I saw him here. He came here to my hometown in Mobile about 6 months ago.
Okay.
To work at Indy, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, several years, and it was so good to see him. But he was in horrible, horrible shape.
Yeah.
He's been, some demons has had a hold of him for a long time. But I have been told by very, very reliable sources that he has just recently got out of rehab, courtesy of Vince, and that he's doing very good. And I'm so glad to hear that, because I was really worried about Jake for a long time. I love Jake to death. We had so much. We got to work with. I mean, we had so many great angles, Orlando.
Yeah.
You know, working with the Ultimate Warrior, the run with him, the run with Jake, the run with Yokozuna, Sid. You know, Sid, and God, I'm leaving out a lot of people because we work with a lot of folks.
No, yeah, definitely.
And the thing about Undertaker, with his position within the company, even early on in his relationship with Vince, that we got to pretty much pick and choose who we got to work with.
Right.
And we just had fun. And you know, from right away when Taker took the belt from Hogan, you know, at Survivor Series, I guess that would have been Survivor Series 91. You know, it was like his first year in the company, and he beat Hogan for the belt. We didn't keep it long, but it's just the fact that he beat Hogan for the belt at that time. Nobody beat Hogan.
Nobody was beating Hogan. And I was always curious. Like, number one, you know, he beat Hogan for the belt, but then they came back with a pay-per-view at the time called This Tuesday in Texas.
Right.
Why was that? Was it a mistake to give The Undertaker the belt that quick?
No. Hey, there's you know, I know there's a lot of hardcore fans listening to me, you know, and they don't believe some of the things that I say when I start talking, you know, philosophy of wrestling and how the business was at that time. But I'm telling you, Vince didn't make very many mistakes. I don't care what you think about Vince McMahon, and I have no reason to lie because I don't have to kiss butts or nothing. You know, those, you know, I never did anyway. But you know, I'm way past that, so I'm not I'm not looking for a job or nothing. Vince made very, very few mistakes. You know, what fans would think would be a mistake. Everything was calculated. We knew a year ahead of time who we was going to be working with.
Okay.
We could tell you a year when the WrestleMania ended one year, we knew who we was going to be working with the next year.
But back then, the pay-per-views weren't as many. Like you know, it was in intervals. You had
had the whole year was planned out.
Yeah.
We knew what our next pay-per-view was going to be. Our next several pay-per-views were going to be, and who we were going to be working with, and what we were going to do, and how we were going to build up. How was, you know, everything was. You know, it's not like that no more, man. It's not like that at all. We had that great run with Kamala when we built Kamala's casket. And, oh, that was some fun stuff to do, man.
That was a great match at Wembley Stadium.
Oh, Wembley Stadium.
Yeah.
Boy, when this country boy from Alabama walked out there in front of 85,000 people, I looked around and I went, what the hell am I doing here?
Wow.
85,000 people, brother. That was, you know, I never worked in front of that many people in my life, and certainly probably will never will again. But Orlando, I've had so many blessings in my life. I really have. I've been very, very blessed. I have. You know, I just turned 54 years old just a couple of weeks ago.
All right.
My wife has survived breast cancer twice.
Okay.
And I have 2 sons, 2 beautiful granddaughters. Things are good. I've been very blessed to, you know, to live my dreams and you know, I'm not bragging. They say when you've done it, it's not bragging, and I've done it, but I've been very, very blessed, and I realize it, and I just thank God and thank all the fans that supported me all these years because it's been a hell of a ride.
Okay. Well, you've worked with so many different personalities, so many different wrestlers. Was there anybody, you know, in the business that you just couldn't get along with, like that just wasn't good for business?
You know, not during my WWE days.
Okay.
Or WWF or WWF then WWE days. Man, if you were an asshole, or if you didn't last long. I'm telling you, you didn't last long. First of all, it's hard. You know, you probably didn't even get in the company back in those days, much less have a chance to even be or stay around. During all those years, and I was on the WWF payroll for 14 years. That don't seem possible, but 14 years. And I'm still under a Legends contract with them, and I still get royalties, you know, all this stuff. And it's all good, but we were very, very lucky. We really were. Now, back early on, you know, back in the world-class days and before that, there was a lot of assholes in the business.
Okay.
There really were. And I was just blessed I survived, I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned coming up in the business with Michael Hayes. I'm sure you've heard what the stories coming out this week. He for those who don't know, he allegedly used a racial term while addressing Mark Henry. This is all alleged, and he's been suspended for 60 days. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you got to know where I'm coming from now, man. We were kids together. We started out in the business together, and I probably know him better than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Great wrestling mind. He's been Vince's right-hand man now for several years, and he's doing very, very well. If this would have happened 10 years ago, nothing would ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
But now, since the company's became a public-owned corporation,
right.
It was a have-to thing. Vince had to do it. He had no choice because people got wind of it, and I can't make excuses for him. I know Michael so well. I know a different Michael though than other people do.
Yeah.
He'd had some Jack Daniels, and
mm-hmm.
and what happened? I don't know what you've been told. What I pretty much got the straight line. I don't know which the stories you heard went down.
Okay.
But Michael was all dressed up, real, in a nice white suit, and looking pretty. He used to call himself Wild Child in the city, running wild, looking pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was Michael, and that's the shoot.
Yeah.
So he's drinking Jack Daniels, and he's all styling and profiling, and it's WrestleMania week and all that shit.
I saw the suit he was wearing because I was watching the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Okay.
Yeah, he was looking dapper, yeah.
Oh, so it was the same suit. I didn't know that. So he had on the same suit he had on the Hall of Fame. Anyway, long story short, he was feeling good, WrestleMania weekend and everything, and Mark Henry walked up, and he was joking around with Mark.
Yeah.
Michael is not a racist, not at all. Believe you me, he is not a racist at all. And it was just something he said. And can I say what he said? What I was told he said? Am I allowed to say that on
Oh
your show?
yeah. This is uncensored. So
he told Mark Henry that he says, "Hey brother, look at me. I'm more of a nigger than you." That's all he said.
Mm.
And y'all, some folks might take offense to that. I don't think it was really offensive, but there was people around that it shouldn't have hurt. It just happened. Anyway, it's a thing, and I know that Michael needs a vacation for sure. So I'm certainly he's enjoying his vacation, but I'm sure he's sorry that it happened too.
Mm-hmm.
But I might be wrong. I didn't think it was that bad of a deal, but it's one of those things.
From the story you heard, did Mark Henry take offense, or was it the people standing around him?
I think it was more of the people around.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I've known Mark Henry for a long time. I knew him when he first started, He's been in the company a long time, but I was there when he came in. I don't know.
But don't you think a word like that should not be used in a public setting like that?
Yeah, that's true. But these are the boys. He's known Mark Henry for hell as long as I have, I guess. And they've been all around the world together. You know what I mean? They've traveled together. They've ate together. They're just brothers. They're the boys. Mm-hmm. So it's just something he said that came out. So I don't know the absolute truth, but I think it was just the people that were around it took more of offense to it than Mark did. I really do.
Okay. Now
I could be wrong.
Now, like you mentioned back 10, 15, 20 years ago, was language like that more common back then?
No. You never said that. You never said the N-word. But now you hear it all the time on the radio. The rap and on television, and you know what I mean. I don't know.
The next thing I wanted to ask you your thoughts on Chris Benoit. Did you get the opportunity to work with him?
Oh, I've known Chris for a long time. I knew Nancy.
Yeah.
I met Nancy back in Florida. We're talking back in the 80s,
mm-hmm.
back when she was with Kevin Sullivan and shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew Nancy a lot longer than I knew Chris. But after they were married and had their little boy, and I held the little boy in my arms.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I am at a total loss for words, and I've been asked this question a lot of times, but I just don't understand. I don't know what happened.
Is there more of a strain or pressure would you say, today on these professional wrestlers? And I would say you have some more of an insight because you've been around, and at the same time, your son is also a professional wrestler.
Right.
You know.
Absolutely. You know, you've got to have the look. I don't care. You've got to have it. You know, to make to be on television. You know, there's few spots, and you've got to have a look. You know, you can't be a big fat slob. You've got to look good. That's what people expect. That's what they want.
Right.
And so the pressure's there. It really is. You know, it sure is.
Okay. One of the many wrestlers you've worked with is the Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you saw the match at WrestleMania.
Oh yes.
What did you think?
Oh, I loved it. I've always been a Flair fan. I've always been a mark for Ric Flair, and I still am to this very day. He paid me one of the biggest compliments I ever had paid to me back in 1985. But when we were talking about working for Eddie Graham back in Florida back then with Rick Rude.
Right.
And Rick, that was during the time that Rick was traveling around the country, around the world, defending the NWA championship. So he would come in. He would come into Florida quite often to defend the belt. But the first time he came in after me and Rick Rude arrived, that was the first time I ever got to meet him in person. I watched him for years, but we had never crossed paths before. But he saw me work, and Wahoo McDaniel was the booker then, and he told Wahoo when Wahoo got finished with me that he wanted to bring me to Atlanta to WCW then.
Nice.
But that never was really meant to be. Although me and Rick Rude did go up and do Atlanta television once. We flew up with Wahoo and Billy Jack Haynes, and I can't remember who else was with us. Hernandez. What was his name?
Gino?
No, not Gino. God. Oh, forget it. I'm having one of those moments where I'm losing my mind.
Not a problem. But yeah, the angle I remember you guys was back, of course, in WWE with Undertaker teaming up with Ric Flair in those matches against Hulk Hogan, and I'm trying to think of the other wrestler at the time. I don't remember who was Hogan's partner.
I don't either. Not with the tag matches.
Yeah. So, but
I'm glad I'm not the only one that has a memory problem.
Those were some good times, and I usually remember them off the top of the head. I'm such a huge wrestling fan. I just wanted to ask you some random thoughts. I know we're winding down here. I just wanted to ask.
We're winding down. I thought we were just getting started.
I don't want to keep you all night now, but I wanted to ask you. Number one, there's something took place with you at an indie show. I was reading on the internet. I don't know if this was true or not. What was it? Suncoast Wrestling. Some kind of controversy. I figured if you could just give us the insight on that.
Let's see. Was this recently?
Something that took place in March of this year at Suncoast Championship Wrestling.
Yes.
Supposedly, you guys, you and your men started fighting in the stands.
No. That wasn't what happened.
Okay.
There's this asshole, know-it-all, Smark.
Okay.
That he thinks he knows everything about our business and blah 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 blah. You've seen him before, somebody that knows it all. They've never put on a pair of boots, never even been in the ring before, but thinks they know it all, and tries to pretend in front of all the fans that he's the know-it-all of everything.
Okay.
Well, anyway, he sets up a table at the matches and sells these little cheap trinkets.
Okay.
Just junk, just flea market junk.
All right.
Well, anyway, this particular evening it was the second match. I was managing my son.
Okay.
And I looked. I saw this guy. There probably were about 150 people in the building. I saw this guy sitting in the back. And said, "Here's my chance to get this son of a bitch." And I told the kid that was working with my son. I hit him. I said, "Come out of the ring and chase me." And I said, "Just follow me." And I had him follow me back to the back corner where this guy was selling his trinkets.
Right.
I told the kid to hit me. When he hit me, I fell into the guy's table and turned his table over.
Ah.
Oh my God! I dumped over a table full of $15 worth of junk. It was made way big deal on what it was. And I'm surprised you even asked me about it. It's not even worth talking about.
Yeah, no, it's something I saw and I figured, something just to,
I
got you on the line. So
that's what happened.
Okay.
He gets on the local message boards, and you know how the local indie message boards are.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I call them a septic tank is what they are. But he gets on there, and Percy Pringle knocked over my table. Oh, he owes me an apology and $150 and all this BS.
Okay. So
that's enough to say about that. That's all it was.
We'll move on. Now, you mentioned the term smart. You know, are you, like, the way the business has evolved today, we all know, you know, it's a work and what goes into the business, and every time something happens, like per se the Michael Hayes incident, it's right on the internet, so every casual fan knows about it. Do you think it's the way the business has evolved, it's good for the business, or do you wish it was more like it was 20 years ago?
Oh, my God. You know, I had this a minute ago. We were talking, and you said something about, you were talking about when you were a kid, and your exact words were, it was before the internet. Do you remember when you said that?
Yes.
And I was kind of thinking then, I almost started talking about this subject when you said that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, and think about it. I understand that you're on the internet. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of your business, you know, you're on the internet. So that has a lot to do with how you make your living. Mm-hmm. But think about it, you know, Orlando. Wasn't it so much fun when you didn't have the internet and you couldn't wait for the show to come on, or couldn't wait to go to the live events, you know, and you didn't know, you know, that the Undertaker's real name was Mark Calloway, mm-hmm. that you didn't know that Paul Bearer's name was Bill Moody, you know, and you didn't know what a work rate was, you didn't know what the blade was, you know, and you could suspend your disbelief and go have fun and eat a hot dog and some French fries and drink a Coke and you know, with your friends and watch wrestling and have a good time.
It was fun.
Yes.
But I was so nosy. I'm like, I got to know more. And, you know, like when a pay-per-view went off the air, I'm like, oh, man, I got to sit here and wait till next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So during the week, I'm thinking about it.
Right.
The only thing, the thing that I dislike about today, we don't have that sense of surprise per se. Like you would watch a pay-per-view and all of a sudden a wrestler who hasn't been in the territory for the past year shows up and you're like, oh, wow, Macho Man came back, you know. Today, you don't get that. So I guess I agree with you. In some respects, I do.
And we talked about it. I have a lot of thoughts on this subject. You didn't open up a can of worms with me, you know, because Orlando, I was a fan too. Like I explained how I got into the business.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt the same way. You know, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know who the guy was that had a mask on. You know, you would have a mask guy back in those days, and nobody knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was the mystery behind it all. Everybody wanted to see the guy get his mask pulled off.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, there's no masked men in the business anymore. Mm-hmm. But even if there are, you know who they are, you know, because of the internet. Mm-hmm. But it took away all the mystery. It took away, you know, and there's good and there's bad about it all. And I'm not talking bad about the fans of today. Mm-hmm. It's just, this is 2008. It's not 1988 anymore, 1978 anymore, and I understand that. And I'm certainly not a bitter old man, you know, looking back saying, what if?
Right.
Because I feel that I still have my finger on the pulse of the business, as I told you earlier, and I have a son that's in the business. And so, you know, I'm not bitter at all or talking bad about either side. It's just, that's the way it is. It's a new generation. Things have changed, and you either adapt or you're out.
Right.
You know, so I've adapt, but I'm still old school at heart. But hell, I'm getting off on another subject. It's perfect. We could go on talking about this for a long time.
It's perfect. I understand what you're saying on that, but at the same time, every time a wrestler comes out with a book, I have to go run by because I want to know what happened behind the scenes at that funeral parlor.
Right.
You know, how you guys came up. You know, is there a possibility of you coming out with a book?
Oh, yeah. In fact, the book's probably done.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, the book has been written. The final chapter certainly hasn't been written yet, but it's just a matter of timing. You know, the book is done, and WWF has I still say WWF after all these years. WWE still has, being I'm under a Legends contract, they have the first dibs at it.
Okay.
So if at time when it's going to be published, you know, so we'll just play it by ear. It's all about timing. But there will be a book sooner or later. We'll just have to wait and see when that time's going to be.
All right. Well, Paul Bearer, Percy Pringle, I would like to thank you so much for joining. Any parting words you want to leave the fans? And, of course, we have to plug your website, percypringle.com.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I certainly enjoyed meeting you, you know, back up in your...
Likewise.
Up in the Sirius studios. And I'm glad that you was able to catch up with me again and was able to do this. and I appreciate all the listeners, and I appreciate you. And if you get really bored, check my website out. It's percypringle.com. It's easy to remember. A lot of old pictures on there, a lot of old stories, and I try to update it as often as I can. I have a blog that when I do get the time, I put a lot of pictures and stuff. In fact, I got a lot of new pictures on there this week from the Florida days with me and Rick Rude from 1985.
Nice.
So if you get time, check it out. And there's an email address on there, and I'm very, very proud of the fact that I read all my own email. I answer all my own email.
Yes, I can attest to that. I can attest to that.
So if you send me an email, and ask me a question or something, you might not like the answer, but I'll certainly answer you the best way I can. And I just appreciate all you folks, and thank you very much for having me on.
www.percypringle.com. Final question. Do you have a WWE 24/7?
No, I don't.
Okay. That's a great service that I have.
Yeah, I truthfully, if I had the time to watch it, I would have it.
Yes.
But I don't have the time. I'm so involved in my real life outside the business, that I don't have kids anymore at home. It's just me and my wife and my 3 dogs. My wife, sure, and that's the last thing she wants to do. Right?
Yeah.
After all these years, we've been married 30 years. Can you imagine being married to a wrestler for 30 years?
Nice.
In fact, there ain't many people. There's not a lot of wrestlers in the world that have been married 30 years, first of all.
Is she happy to have you back around the house after being...
I don't know about that. I don't know. Thank you so much, Orlando. Thank all you folks out there, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, America. That was Percy Pringle. You know him in the WWF as Mr. Paul Bearer on OQ's Wrestling Wrap-Up, a wrestling-radio.com audio exclusive.